Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens EcoFlora project, where this month we will be focusing on cabbage palm epiphytes in the EcoQuest Check Your Boots. Standing with me today is Jono Miller, an expert on cabbage palms. Jono, it's great to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I started out in New Jersey looking at palm trees in my Golden Nature Guide, moved to Sarasota in 1970 to attend New College, and started getting really interested in the local environment, and that eventually led to a kind of specific interest in cabbage palms.
So you're obviously a big fan of cabbage palms, but why should other people be interested in cabbage palms or palms in general?
Well, there's so many reasons to be intrigued with cabbage palms. They played a really important role in the Revolutionary War that many people are unaware of. We may not have a United States if it weren't for cabbage palms that helped defend the entrance to Charleston Harbor. They're incredible wildlife food. You know, our pines and oaks, which are really important components of our forests here in Florida, are wind pollinated. And so when it comes to major insect pollinated trees, the cabbage palm stands out, and they can have 1 million tiny blossoms on one palm. So they're very important in terms of wildlife. They're found in many different habitats, from our beaches into our hammocks throughout the state. They show up in Elvis Presley movies. They were eaten as swamp cabbage. They're an important landscape plant that are used throughout the state. So they show up in many different venues, I would say.
Wow, so from the birth of our country to Elvis Presley, we've had cabbage palms. That's incredible.
Yes.
So, cabbage palms are everywhere, and they're obviously very ubiquitous to Florida. Can you go into a little bit more detail of how long we've had cabbage palms, or sable palms in Florida?
Right, so the current cabbage palm, the genus is sable and the species is palmetto. They have fossil sable palms from the panhandle of Florida that are somewhere between 6 and 18 million years old. But there's sable fossils from elsewhere on the planet that are 80 million years old. So this is a very successful genus that's been around for a long time. And there are about, I think, 11 other species of sable palms still extant.
All right, well, if there's 11 extant species, that might make identification a little difficult. Can you go into some good ways to differentiate cabbage palms from other palms?
Well, here in Sarasota, Manatee area, the most common palm you're going to find that has a tree form is the cabbage palm. So if you just start out by guessing, you'd be halfway there. They can have a trunk that appears in two different forms, either relatively smooth trunk, which is referred to as slick, or a trunk with boot jacks on it. The leaves themselves are uncommon shape. So if you're familiar with a coconut palm, that has a feathery sort of leaf that's called a pinnate leaf form. And if you're familiar with the palms that you see in the opening shots of movies shot in LA, those are palmate palms with all the leaflets radiating from a common point. The cabbage palm has an unusual leaf shape that's called costa palmate, and it has sort of a spear-shaped triangular organ at the end of the leaf stem, and then many leaflets, or leaf segments, I should say, protrude from that. And so instead of being a flat palm frond, like you might think of a saw palmetto more, it has a sort of undulating shape, and that three-dimensional shape helps you identify it. And another distinguishing feature is that in between the leaf segments, the fringy part that you see at the edge of a thatched roof, in between those segments are almost inconspicuous filaments or hairs that are growing between there. And you won't find those on saw palmettos. So even if it's a young cabbage palm, you should be able to tell it from a saw palmetto. So I would look for boot jacks, a leaf shape that's kind of undulating, and those hairs in between the leaf segments.
So you've talked a little bit about boot jacks and how they're useful for identifying the palm. And we saw earlier how they got their name bootjack, but why are bootjacks so important to epiphytes, and why are they so useful for that?
Well, it's really interesting to think about the architecture of a cabbage palm. Most leaves on dicot trees are there for a season or maybe two. These leaves on the cabbage palm have to persist for a number of years, and they typically, where they originate from the tree, point upwards. And so that creates an opportunity for organic matter to accumulate between the leaf stem and the trunk. And so that little cup in there creates a space where soil can start to form. And so you can find a number of plants that germinate in there. Figs are really common, and I know you did a great project recently with some of our local figs. But other plants can germinate there. And then even after the bootjacks rot and decompose and fall off, there's still remnant material immediately below the canopy of the tree, and that's the place where you'll find your golden polypody ferns and your shoestring ferns.
Incredible. So there's obviously a wide variety of epiphytes in these trees. Are there any unusual epiphytes that we might want to be on the lookout for?
There's a very unusual epiphyte that you won't find, and it's called the hand fern. There are believed to be only 50 examples left in the state of Florida. You can find some down in the Big Cypress Swamp. It's a very strange fern. They're also found, for instance, in Madagascar. And the sad thing is that collectors really would love to have this rare fern, and people try to bring them into cultivation, and they inevitably die. And so the number of these ferns, it looks almost like a type of staghorn fern. So it's a native fern here in Florida, but we're not going to see any of those in Sarasota. You can, on the horizontal trunks, if a tree is not growing straight up, you'll sometimes see our resurrection fern. And then you'll also see a variety of other plants that we don't normally think of as epiphytes, but plants that can germinate in those little cups that form at the base of the leaf. And so you can find baby oak trees or germinating Brazilian pepper, just about anything that a seed could fall in there. If it's close enough to the ground, you might notice something sprouting up that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah, we even saw some epiphytic cactuses growing up some cabbage palms just before this interview.
Right. Now, those cactus are sometimes secondary hemiepiphytes, and what that means is sometimes they will start growing on the ground and then grow up into the tree, but on occasion they will lose their connection to the ground. And so instead of starting in the tree the way a fig might and growing down to establish contact with the soil, these start in the soil and sometimes end up independent of the soil and living strictly in the canopy of the tree.
Very fascinating. And are there any good places in Sarasota and Manatee counties you'd recommend to see cabbage palms with lots of epiphytes?
Well, if you're looking for the figs, they're going to do better in the warmer locations. So along the coast, there's a number of, if you wander around St. Armand's, which may seem like an odd place to look for great native vegetation, but there are a number of really spectacular native strangler figs growing out at St. Armand's. And you may also find some of these other trees that are not necessarily thought of as epiphytes. If you just want to see some great ferns, some of the polypodies and the shoestring fern, Myakka Park is a great place to go look at palms.
All right. Well, you told us so much about cabbage palms. You've written a book about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, and is it available yet?
Okay, well, I've worked on the book for about 10 years, following up on my graduate work at the University of South Florida in St. Pete in their Florida Studies program. And the book is, I guess you would say, semi-available. Probably by the time people see this, it should be in bookstores by the middle of March. Right now, the only people that have it are people that ordered it directly from the University of Florida Press. But it has 24 chapters. And it's a variety of essays. They can be read sequentially or independently. And it's a mix. Some of it's natural history, dealing with how long they live and where they're found and how they grow. But others deal with the cultural history of how people eat them and how they appear in fine art. and the Elvis movies included in there. And so it's a mix of natural history and cultural history.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for coming, Jono. And for anyone who has seen this video, be sure to check us out online for the full interview. I might ask him one or two more questions after this, just off the topics. I think that's all we have time for this video, though. We hope to see you all out there checking your boots and boot jacks for this month's EcoFlora EcoQuest. Tune into the Sarasota Manatee EcoFlora iNaturalist projects for every one of our monthly EcoQuests. Thank you very much and have a good day.